One portion of fries, $9. A simple burger, $19. A dinner for two, over $300, and still left feeling not worth it. This isn't a fancy dinner in New York or Paris. This is America, where just a few years ago, eating out was a natural part of life. And yet, now, the restaurant is empty, the menu is expensive, and the people have left. What has changed? Why do even people with stable incomes feel that dinner is no longer worth the money? Why are inexpensive foods from the industrial supply chain sold at a higher price than fresh produce? This is a story about more than just price. It's the story of how greed, inflation, and the economic system have turned the dining experience, once familiar to all Americans, into a luxury item. And if you think you'll be eating out again someday, think again. When you leave the house for a normal dinner and it feels like you just paid rent, that's the general feeling of millions of Americans right now, and perhaps you're among them too. A few years ago, going out for dinner was a small pleasure after a tiring week, but by 2025, it had become a financial decision. And what many Americans find most infuriating isn't the rising prices. It's how absurdly unacceptable things have become. A simple order of fries, which used to cost just a few dollars, now costs up to $9. A Subway sandwich, once a cheap option, can now cost $8.99, and if you order delivery, the total bill can easily reach $30–40. A basic breakfast at Denny's, eggs, toast, coffee, exceeds $20. And a dinner for two in Miami? Unbelievable number, $300. Even though the food was nothing special, these numbers are no longer an exception. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the cost of eating out has increased by over 30% since 2019, faster than the overall inflation rate. Raw material costs increased by up to 35%, labor wages jumped by 20 to 30%, and all of this was passed on to diners' bills. But the problem isn't just about money, it's the feeling of being ripped off every time you open the menu. Consumers are not only paying more, they are also getting less. Smaller portions, lower quality, and colder service. One commenter said, "Prices doubled while portions got smaller. Ingredients were low quality, service was poor, and they demanded money." Good someone else sarcastically remarked, "Life has come full circle." Eating out as a child in the 1970s was an exciting and rare experience. Eating out after the age of 50 is now also an interesting and rare experience. When prices cross a psychological threshold, that is, the point at which people no longer feel the expenditure is worthwhile, consumer behavior begins to change. For many Americans, eating out is no longer a reward after a week of work, but a worrying expense, even a luxury they can only afford a few times a year. What's more noteworthy is that this cycle is self-reinforcing. As prices rise, fewer customers come, fixed costs are spread across each bill, and restaurants are forced to raise prices even further. And so, an experience that once brought simple joy became a luxury people wanted to avoid. And that's perhaps the value shock that's reshaping the entire American restaurant industry. But that was just the beginning of a deeper crisis, where prices and value no longer went hand in hand. In the next section, let's delve into the causes. What made costs rise so quickly, and why couldn't restaurants maintain prices that customers felt were worth the money? When Americans look at an $80 bill for 2 pizzas and a glass of wine, the first reaction is often anger. Why is it so expensive? But the truth is that behind every number on that bill is a complex spiral of costs, where everything escalates and it all ends up in the pockets of the final consumer. Let's delve into each layer of that spiral to understand why the cost of eating out has become so absurd. First, the price of raw materials is escalating, from farm to table. A burger is not just beef and bread, it's an entire supply chain stretching thousands of kilometers, and that chain is in high demand. Beef prices in the US have risen by over 35% since 2019, as the cost of feed, fuel, and drought have impacted supply. Vegetables, grains, and cooking oil, which are basic ingredients, also increased by 20 to 50% due to global inflation and geopolitical instability. Additionally, shipping costs increased significantly as fuel prices soared, adding hundreds of dollars to the cost of each food container. And the result is that the average restaurant's raw material costs are now nearly 40% higher than before the pandemic, a figure that cannot be ignored. The next reason to mention is the labor storm, paying more for less. If in the past, the salary of a waiter only accounted for a small portion of the total operating costs, it has now become one of the largest expenses. In California, the minimum wage for the restaurant industry has increased to $19 per hour, and in some places, it's even $23, $25 to retain employees. After the pandemic, millions of people left the service industry. The labor shortage is forcing restaurants to increase wages, offer additional bonuses, and provide benefits, all of which are driving up costs. But the problem lies in the fact that customers don't receive better service, yet they have to pay for it. A $20 meal not only includes ingredients, but also wages, training costs, and employee retention expenses, costs that few people previously considered. The third reason relates to premises and taxes, the increasing burden of intangible costs. If you've ever wondered why the same dish is more expensive in New York or San Francisco, the answer lies in two words: real estate. Commercial space rental prices in major cities have increased by an average of 20 to 40% compared to pre-COVID levels. Many restaurant owners also have to bear additional costs for maintenance, insurance, property taxes, etc., all of which are factored into the price of every burger you eat. In other words, you're not just paying for the meal, you're also paying for the address where it's served. The food delivery era also has its downsides. Apps like Uber Eats or DoorDash charge a commission of 20 to 30% per order. If the restaurant doesn't raise prices, they will lose money. If prices increase, customers have to bear the cost. Additionally, digital advertising costs, order management software, cashless payment systems, etc., are all new expenses that were virtually non-existent 10 years ago. And finally, what makes many customers the most angry is everything is increasing except the experience. The food is still frozen from the warehouse, the service is still slow, the space is still mediocre, but the prices have doubled. A small restaurant owner once shared, "I do everything from scratch, keep prices reasonable, treat my staff well, and the restaurant is still thriving." The problem isn't that it's impossible. The problem is that many places choose the easier path, cutting corners, raising prices, and losing trust. As you can see, all those factors create a cost spiral. When raw material prices increase, wages increase, rent increases, and overhead costs rise, forcing menu prices to increase accordingly. And as prices rise, customers withdraw, leaving fixed costs to be spread among fewer people. The cycle continues. This is the underlying reason why eating out, once a normal activity, has become a financial decision. But it doesn't stop there. Because there's another factor shaking the entire American restaurant industry. Customer trust is collapsing. And that's what we'll talk about next. Perhaps the most heartbreaking thing for American consumers isn't having to pay more for their meals, but realizing that they're no longer paying for cuisine, they're just paying for an industrial product. Food was once an art. A meal was once the result of skill, fresh ingredients, and love for the diner. But now, many people feel that what appears on their dinner tables is no longer food in the true sense, but rather a mass-produced commodity, cold, soulless, and dishonest. Many Americans have now seen through the kitchen curtain. They knew perfectly well that behind that shiny stainless steel door, it wasn't a chef meticulously preparing each dish, but rather frozen food bags from Sysco, Costco, or Walmart, reheated and plated. The pastries are heavily advertised as homemade, but in reality, they are defrosted goods from a cold storage facility. Dishes like dumplings, ravioli, or tiramisu are bought in bulk, thawed in minutes, and sold for $15, $20. Even the main courses were simplified to the point of resembling canned goods from the supermarket. One comment above stated bluntly, "They sell things that are like garbage and call it food." And that feeling isn't unique. It's the shared disappointment of an entire generation of customers who once believed that when they stepped into a restaurant, they were being served cuisine, not a product. Why would restaurants risk losing customer trust like this? The answer lies in one word: profit. Since the pandemic, a series of restaurant chains have been acquired by private equity funds. And for them, the goal isn't to maintain quality or tradition, it's to cut costs and maximize short-term profits. No more skilled chefs, just staff to reheat food. No need to bake every morning, just stock up from the warehouse. No need for an extensive menu, just a few popular, easy-to-cook, high-profit items. What's the result? Most people have already seen through it. Experience is being homogenized. All restaurants are the same, all menus are familiar, and customers feel they have no reason to return. Trust is the foundation of the culinary industry. Consumers are willing to pay a premium not just for the taste, but because they believe the dish is made with passion, skill, and appreciation. But now, they pay $25 for a pre-made item from the supermarket. They spent $50 on a restaurant-quality meal that felt like reheated fast food. And each time, a small piece of that belief was lost. Americans seem to no longer trust the F&B industry. They are skeptical every time they hold a menu. They are suspicious when they hear the words fresh or homemade. And once trust is lost, no amount of discounts, promotions, or luxurious decorations can bring them back. And it's important to remember that Americans didn't just pay for food, they used to pay for trust. And when that trust is betrayed, all marketing campaigns or promotional tricks become meaningless. It was industrialization, quality cuts, and a dismissive attitude toward customers that plunged the American restaurant industry into a crisis of trust. And this is a deeper wound than any inflation figure. And next, let's look at how consumers responded. They stopped complaining. They left the restaurant and made their own meals at home. If in the past eating out was a natural part of American life, a social habit almost without thought, it has now become a decision that must be carefully considered. And what's noteworthy is, consumers don't just complain and then continue to eat out. They are fundamentally changing behavior. More and more Americans are choosing the simplest way to cope with unreasonable prices, returning to their own kitchens. According to many surveys, over 60% of consumers say they are cooking at home more frequently to save money. And the disparity is truly astonishing. A bowl of homemade soup costs just 0.80 euros, while a similar portion at a restaurant can cost up to 20 USD. But this isn't just a story about money, it's also a feeling of control. When Americans cook at home, they not only save money, they also know exactly what they're eating, the quality of the food, and don't have to pay extra for cold service or frozen meals. One user commented, "My husband and I started buying pre-packaged frozen meals at Aldi to replace eating out. We immediately noticed that they tasted exactly like takeout, but for only a quarter of the price." Another trend is also strongly impacting restaurant revenue. Young people are giving up alcoholic beverages. Gen Z and millennials drink less alcohol than any previous generation. And the reason is very simple. A $22 cocktail, sometimes even as expensive as a meal, is simply not worth it. Instead of sitting at the bar and spending money on watered-down drinks, many people choose to buy them to take home and enjoy with friends. This caused a significant drop in revenue from beverages, which were once the restaurant's profit goldmine. More importantly, consumer behavior changes are not only about what people eat, but also where and why they eat it. In the past, Restaurants were places for connection, meeting friends, going on dates, making memories. Now, with prices soaring and quality declining, that experience is no longer as appealing as it once was. Instead, many people are choosing alternative experiences, organizing picnics in the park, cooking together at home, or enjoying casual meals in an intimate setting. This not only saves costs, but also fosters a sense of connection, something many restaurants have lost today. All these changes seem to be sending a very clear message to the restaurant industry. Customers have learned to live without you. When cooking at home offers savings, control, and enjoyment, when expensive drinks are no longer appealing, and when social experiences can be replicated anywhere, eating out is no longer an essential need. This is a wake-up call. If restaurants can't offer value far beyond the bill amount, Americans will continue to choose the cheaper, tastier, and closer option right in their own kitchens. To fully understand the significance of the restaurant industry crisis, we need to look beyond price or revenue figures. Because behind the empty tables, behind the bills that make people hesitate, is a much deeper story. An entire culture is disappearing. Let's rewind a few decades. Dinner wasn't just about filling your stomach. It was a moment of family bonding, where friends met after work, and where couples went on their first dates. The restaurant used to be an extension of American society's living room, a place where people shared joy, chatted, and reminisced. An evening at a local eatery can be the glue that binds a community together, a place where life stories are told with every dish. But now, what was once a social ritual has become an economic burden. A dinner for two can cost up to $150, $300, and instead of being excited, people come to the restaurant with a sense of worry about the bill. Instead of feeling served, many people feel like they are being ripped off. The consequence is that more and more people are skipping restaurants and choosing other ways to connect. Cooking at home, picnics in the park, self-organized parties with friends. Eating out is no longer an essential part of social life. This change is having a significant impact. A series of local eateries, once the soul of the neighborhood, are having to close because they no longer have enough customers. The streets that used to be brightly lit on weekends are now quiet, and when restaurants disappear, we lose more than just a place to eat. We lose a part of our social space to meet, talk, and understand each other. A sociologist once said, "Food not only nourishes the body, it nourishes relationships." When the culture of eating out declines, society also loses one of the most invisible yet powerful threads that connect people. The truth is, America isn't just losing restaurants. America is losing cozy evenings around the dinner table, storytelling among strangers, and small moments that create big memories. And that is the greatest loss, a loss that money cannot measure. In the next part, we'll look ahead. Can the restaurant industry be reborn? And if so, what would it need to change to win back the hearts of Americans? After everything that's happened, rising prices, declining quality, betrayed trust, and a shaken-up dining culture, the biggest question remains. Does the American restaurant industry still have a future? The answer is yes, but it certainly won't be like it was before. The next generation of restaurants may not be luxurious spaces with extensive menus, but rather ghost kitchens, seatless kitchens that only serve through delivery to reduce overhead costs. Subscription dining models, eating based on regular packages or loyalty memberships, are also being tested, helping customers have a stable experience at a more reasonable cost. Additionally, the farm-to-table trend and small artisanal restaurants focused on quality and transparency are gradually returning and gaining the trust of consumers tired of industrial food. The future of the F&B industry will also be closely tied to technology. Cooking robots, AI-powered menu management systems, and ingredient optimization can significantly reduce costs, opening up the possibility of bringing prices back to a more reasonable level while still ensuring quality. Perhaps Future restaurants will not only be places to eat, but also places to connect, share, and redefine the value of cuisine. To do that, the industry needs to learn to listen, change, and regain lost trust. The biggest question now isn't whether we'll return to the golden age, but rather, how will we build a new food culture? Now I'd like to hear your perspective. Are you still willing to spend money on eating out? And what needs to change for you to feel like it's worth the money again? If you enjoy deep analyses like this, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below so we can continue the conversation together. Please note that this is not financial or investment advice. It is simply a social perspective to help you better understand a phenomenon that is reshaping America. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next videos.